My name is Kevin Tao, and today I'm going to teach you about the science behind cytolytic vaginosis. The reason I have experience to talk about this is because I have been the co-founder of NeuEve ever since we started for about 14 years. And we've been helping thousands and thousands of women with issues just like CV, as well as a bunch of other issues. And my mom, she's a gynecologist. She has been delivering babies ever since she's 19. So she's about 70 now. So she's been a gynecologist 51 years at least now. Yeah, she's super smart. Together, we've created all these products. We're building this company. We're helping hundreds of thousands of women. And today, I'm going to hope to teach you, we're going to do a little bit of talking about what's really going on with CV. So first of all, we're going to talk about what a normal vagina looks like. What's the normal mechanism of the normal case? Then we're going to talk about the problem case. Then we're going to talk about the various different treatment options you have. Option 1 being baking soda, option 2 being antibiotics, and option 3 being NeuEve. All right, let's begin. What is happening in a normal, healthy vagina? That is the question. So in this vaginal canal, in the normal case, we have a pH that is somewhere between 3.8 and 4.5. pH is like acidity. We have a lot of lactobacilli, somewhere between, let's say, 80% to 95% lactobacilli. And one of the things about lactobacilli, you notice there's the word lacto in it. Lactobacilli eats lactose and it creates lactic acid. Lactobacilli also like being inside acid. The acid creates this kind of pH level, which is pretty acidic, which helps to reinforce the lactobacilli population. That's what's happening in a normal, healthy vagina. One of the reasons why there even is lactobacilli, the vaginal wall is made of vaginal epithelial cells, basically skin cells. And just like with skin, the base layer is alive, and then, so I guess we would say here would be some blood vessels. There's going to be layers and layers and layers of skin, and the base layers are alive, and then they slowly die off as each new layer comes in, and then at the surface is going to be almost like there's going to be a lot of these dead skin cells, and the dead skin cells slowly flake off, and inside each skin cell that flakes off is something called glycogen. Glycogen is a type of sugar. It has glucose in it. It's a type of sugar that is inside of these vaginal epithelial cells, and this stuff feeds lactobacilli. The glycogen is food for lactobacilli, which is the reason why the lactobacilli population is there, and that's what's happening. Here's what the problems can be. Sometimes in your life, you could have very high estrogen because you start taking some estrogen supplements for, you're starting menopause and you take a crap load of estrogen supplements. So it might be high estrogen. What are the things that can cause this problem? One of the things might be you're taking very high estrogen. Another thing that might happen is you might take a lot of probiotics. What happens when you have really high estrogen or really high probiotics? Well, if you have really high estrogen, it may cause the vaginal epithelial to grow a lot faster and flake off a lot more. And so you end up having a lot of extra glycogen flaking off the vaginal epithelium, or you might have a lot of probiotics. In either case, what happens is that this leads to your lactobacilli population becoming really high. So maybe around 96%, all the way up to 99% or even 100%. And once your lactobacilli becomes this high, what happens is that it produces a lot of acid. Your acid gets really high. This is bad. This is so much acid. The pH is now lower than 3.8. So when your pH is this low, well, what ends up happening is that the acid now starts to burn the walls. The really high acid now causes the walls to burn. When they start to burn, what happens is they start to burst. The walls will burst, and the insides of each of your vaginal epithelial wall will end up popping, almost like a piñata, opening up. Like each epithelial skin cell has a bunch of glycogen inside of it, and then it bursts out open, And so the massive amount of glycogen that gets released now feeds lactobacilli, and this becomes a cycle. High lactobacilli causes high acid causes your vaginal epithelial cells to burn, and then once they're burning, they pop. Once they pop, it releases glycogen, which feeds more lactobacilli, which keeps on going. The cycle keeps on going. So therefore, what do we notice in the problem case? What we notice is that in your 28-day monthly cycle, when do the symptoms get the worst? So what ends up happening is this. The symptoms that people have under CV are things like vaginal burning, throbbing pain. That's pretty much it. What ends up happening is that as each day goes on and on and on, the cycle gets worse and worse and worse. You get more and more acid, and it gets worse if this is the period. It gets the worst the day before the period. And then blood is actually alkaline. Blood is not acidic. Blood is the opposite of acidic. So when the period happens, your symptoms go away completely. There's no symptoms whatsoever during your period because your pH is back to normal while your period is happening. And then once your period is over, then the symptoms start up again. So one of the ways to know, for instance, yeast infections and CV sometimes can be confused for each other because there's some similar pain, itching, burning feelings. If this is the cycle of your symptoms, then your issue is CV. Yeast infections have a totally different cycle. It's not like this. That is the problem. That's what's happening with CV. Now let's talk about baking soda. One of the ways that people, if you go online and read about CV to see how to fix it, one of the suggestions is to use baking soda. So you have lactobacilli that's too high, which leads to acidity that's too high, which leads to cells popping and releasing nutrients. So the idea behind baking soda is that we're going to block the acidity, bring it back to normal. If we bring it back to normal, it's going to stop this from popping. If the cells stop popping, the lactobacilli goes down. When you put baking soda in your vagina. So there's different ideas. You can either do a baking soda sitz bath, you can do baking soda suppositories. What happens is, if you remember from chemistry class, baking soda is very, very powerful for countering acid. It's very powerful, but it doesn't have any lasting power. It doesn't have any depth. There's no buffer. What ends up happening is that it'll make acidity go down fast, but it'll be down temporarily. So the acid will go down fast, but it's very temporary. And it's also very easy to overshoot because with baking soda, if you put in a little bit too much, it'll shoot past, because the ideal pH that you want is between this range of 3.8 to 4.5. Right now your pH is probably like 3.7 or 3.6 or something. If you're trying to make your pH into this range, it's very easy to overshoot with something like baking soda. That's the downside of baking soda. Let's talk about antibiotics. How does antibiotics work? Well, antibiotics says let's fight this cycle from here, because the problem is having really high lactobacilli. If you kill the lactobacilli, then you're going to stop the acidity, stops the cell from popping. That's what antibiotics does. It does just kills all the lactobacilli along with everything else, which is going to make your problems go away. Very powerful, very fast, easy. But what happens? What comes after? You're wiping out all of these bacteria in your system. Well, it leaves you you become open to yeast. You become open to anything. Anything that comes back, you're open to. You gotta be very careful with antibiotics. Things can build tolerances. I haven't really heard of lactobacilli really building up too many tolerances to antibiotics. I think this is the direct thing though, is that using antibiotics, it's powerful. Antibiotics are great. They save a lot of lives. Maybe there's a different way. Like, lactobacilli are good guys. We don't have to be so hard on them. Let's talk about how NeuEve works. So NeuEve's approach is this. So NeuEve's approach does two things. Number one, we mildly block the lactobacilli just a little bit. We change a few little environmental factors. We have all different kinds of natural ingredients. We use a couple antimicrobial ingredients that are mild, super mild, to mildly antimicrobial, natural antimicrobial ingredients. And then here we buffer the acidity. So we formulate our suppository to force the acidity to stay exactly between 3.8 and 4.5. It will not go higher than 4.5, it will not go lower than 3.8, and we just hold it in. We just hold the acidity here. This is the key. If you just hold the acidity in place to exactly 3.8 to 4.5, you bring the acidity down, then the cells stop popping, then the lactobacilli goes down. That's what we do. That's how it works. Our product is called CV Clear. It's available for $48. It's a suppository, all natural ingredients with acid-base buffering, as well as mild antimicrobial things in there, as well as other ingredients to help soothe, because there is a lot of burning in it. That's not great. When you start the CV Clear treatment, depending on how severe it is, you just use it. So I want to let you know, here is the schedule for using CV Clear. Let's say you start on a Monday, you insert the suppository on a Monday, and then you'd wait 3 days, and then you'd insert it again on Thursday, and then wait 3 days, and then on Sunday, you would insert another one. If you have a mild case of CV, 1 pack should be enough. If you have a very persistent case, you might need 2 or 3 packs, and then once that's done, the idea is we just have to hold your acidity to this level for long enough for the cells to stop popping, for things to go back normal. So that's the main idea. After this is cleared, what you should do is you should just use 1 pack a month, just once a week, to just maintain things and make sure things stay normal and reasonable. So you would use that like on every 4 weeks. On the week that's not your period, you'd use 1 a week for 3 weeks and then exclude the week of your period. So that is our plan to help fix CV. I hope this is informative, and thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your day.